They say routine offers comfort, but mine had become anything but, especially since it revolved around my mother-in-law, Sylvia. She'd waltz into my house as if it were her own, using the spare key I told Connor to retrieve months ago. "Erin," she'd announce one Tuesday morning, "a woman your age should be preparing for motherhood, not QuickBooks reports." Sylvia exuded judgment like a strong perfume. Thick, undeniable, and impossible to ignore. A former beauty queen who had transitioned into a corporate matriarch. She placed immense value on appearances, lineage, and a firm hand at the dinner table. Her proximity just 2 streets away meant she could, and often did, drop in unannounced at any moment. I was 36, a full-time accountant for a regional logistics firm. Childless, tired, and as it turned out, slowly being erased from my own marriage. Sylvia poured herself coffee as if I had offered it. She had the spreadsheets open on my laptop, then sighed dramatically. "I'm worried," she said like she meant it, without a baby. "Who's going to inherit the company?" "Connor's the only heir. No child means the Blake family line ends here." I bit back a dozen responses. The company was a mid-sized transport chain founded by her husband, Mason. Sylvia talked about it like it was the Roman Empire. "I have a meeting in 20 minutes. Feel free to lock up behind you." She didn't move. "You've been married 8 years. Are you even trying anymore?" I didn't answer. I couldn't, because the truth was, we had tried. We'd cried together, failed together, but eventually we stopped, even hoping, and it was just me, managing the house, the bills, my job, and the echo of what used to be a marriage. Connor, my husband, had always been softer than his parents. At 38, he still deferred to Sylvia like a teenager caught smoking. I used to think that made him kind. Now I wondered if it just made him weak. He started coming home late again. First it was once a week, then twice. Then 4 nights in a row, client dinner, he'd mutter, shrugging off his coat. I initially wanted to believe him. Then came the nights he refused to eat what I cooked. "You already ate?" I asked once, trying to keep my voice calm. He didn't even look up. "Had a burger with the guys." You don't even like burgers, I thought, but said nothing. That night, I suggested a weekend getaway, just the 2 of us, to try and reconnect. He sighed as if I'd asked him to build a rocket. "Maybe if you gave my mom less attitude and gave me more attention," he said, "we wouldn't have this problem." My heart stung as if I'd walked into a glass door. "What problem?" I whispered. He didn't answer. He simply walked upstairs and closed the bedroom door behind him. A few days later, I found an envelope on the kitchen counter already opened. I wasn't snooping, it was just there. The sender was Coastal Credit and Finance, and the summary inside made my hands go cold. Outstanding balance, $14,762.54. There were itemized charges: Cartier bracelet spa, World Platinum membership, Louis Vuitton. My name wasn't on anything, but our home address was. That same night, I dug through the kitchen trash. I found shredded receipts, taped them together like a crime scene puzzle. All of them dated from the last 6 weeks. One showed a charge for a $900 silk robe, another for a couple's massage. None of these were mine. That's when I noticed the perfume. It wasn't mine. I hadn't worn perfume in months, but the faint lingering scent of jasmine on Connor's dress shirts clung like guilt. I didn't confront him. Not yet. Instead, I started watching, checking mileage, taking photos of the receipts, saving bank statements. I told myself I was collecting evidence, but the truth was, I was bracing. For the moment, I'd have no choice but to face what I already knew. That moment came at 2:34 a.m. 3 weeks later. The ringtone pierced the darkness. It was Connor's phone vibrating on his nightstand. He wasn't home. Said he was helping with a warehouse audit in Cleveland. The number was unfamiliar. I hesitated, then picked up a woman's voice, answered high-pitched and breathless. "Are you Connor's wife?" The sudden question jolted me upright. "Yes. Who is this?" I managed to ask. "He collapsed at the hotel." My heart seized. "Oh, God. He's at the plaza, the downtown one." They're taking him to St. Luke's Hospital. It's his heart, please. He's critical. The line went dead. Barely registering, I threw on jeans over my pajamas, grabbed my keys, and drove through the night on autopilot. My heart hammered so loudly I feared I might pass out behind the wheel. The hospital's sterile scent of bleach and cold metal hit me immediately. The nurse at the front desk remained impassive as I rushed in. "Are you family? Wife?" I barely got the words out. She simply nodded, as if she'd seen it all before. "Cardiac wing. Room. They just stabilized him. You'll want to prepare yourself." Prepare myself for what? I couldn't feel my legs. My mouth was dry. The hallway stretched ahead like a tunnel, sterile and endless, each fluorescent light overhead buzzing louder than the last. As I reached the turn toward his room, I slowed and stopped. A woman was already standing outside. Room 412. She looked like she'd stepped out of a glossy magazine. Tall, slender, barely out of college, with smooth blonde hair that probably cost more than my mortgage payment. Her black dress was designer. Her heels were the kind you don't wear unless you expect to be seen. And yet she was trembling, clutching a Louis Vuitton handbag like a life preserver. Mascara streaked her cheeks. She looked wrecked. When her eyes met mine, she stiffened. "You must be Erin," she said, her voice cracked on my name. Her hands shook. I stopped a few feet away, heart pounding. "Who are you?" She swallowed hard. "I'm Harper. Connor and we were supposed to get married." The words hit me like a slap. I blinked. "What did you just say?" She stepped back, flustered. I didn't think you'd get here this fast. He texted me earlier, said his chest hurt, but he didn't want me to panic. I thought it was nothing." I stared at her, my mind trying to catch up. Young, beautiful, crying, dressed like a grieving widow, wearing his bracelet. The one I gave Connor for our 5th anniversary, and she was here first in front of his door. She belonged there. I didn't speak to her again until hours later. Harper had disappeared into the ICU waiting room while I sat by Connor's side, numb and silent. The machines beeped steadily. The oxygen line hissed. His face was pale. His chest rose and fell like it was on borrowed time. The doctor told me it was a massive heart attack. They'd stabilized him for now, but the damage was extensive. At some point, I became aware of Sylvia's perfume. Before I saw her, that familiar floral cloud, thick and cloying, announced her presence. "Where is he?" she demanded as she stormed down the hallway. Mason, my father-in-law, following behind, grim-faced. I stood and pointed silently toward the room. She rushed in and gasped at the sight of her son. Then she turned sharply toward me. "What happened?" "I wasn't there," I said quietly. Before she could fire off another accusation, the elevator doors opened again, and Harper stepped out. Sylvia's gaze swept over the girl, and instead of the shock or confusion I anticipated, I saw something far more profound: recognition. "Oh my God," Sylvia whispered. "You must be Harper." Harper nodded, her lips trembling and eyes glistening. "I'm pregnant," she said softly, "with Connor's child." Mason gasped. Sylvia's reaction was entirely unexpected. She didn't slap Harper, didn't yell, and didn't even glance at me. Instead, she rushed forward and embraced Harper as if she were a long-lost daughter. "Oh, thank God," Sylvia cried. "I was so afraid our bloodline would end with him. You have no idea how long I've prayed for this." I stood frozen as Harper collapsed into Sylvia's arms, as if they were old friends. I wanted to scream. I wanted to vomit. But mostly I wanted answers. Connor died 2 days later, just like that. He never woke up, never opened his eyes, never spoke another word to me. The doctor said his heart gave out during the night. Sylvia sobbed. Harper wailed, and I just stood there empty. The man I married for 8 years had been living a double life, and now I had to plan his funeral with his mistress in tow. "Include her," Sylvia said flatly as we met in the family room of the funeral home. "She's carrying his child." "She's family. She is not family," I replied. "She is now." Mason sat silently in the corner, rubbing his temples. "You want her to sit where with us?" "Yes," Sylvia said, front row. "And you expect me to host the service, deliver the eulogy?" Stand beside a woman I didn't know existed last week. She's carrying our future. Sylvia snapped. Don't be petty. I nearly laughed. Petty. I was being asked to swallow betrayal, humiliation, and grief, and smile through it for the sake of appearance. But in the end, I agreed, not because of them, but because of Mason. She should do it, he said quietly. Connor may have made mistakes, but this service should be done right. Erin deserves that, and so I agreed. I regretted it. The second the door is opened on the day of the funeral, the chapel was packed. Connor's casket stood at the front, draped in flowers. I stood next to it, numb and black. Then she arrived, Harper, wearing a fitted black dress, pearls, soft waves in her hair, and that same Louis Vuitton bag on her arm. She looked like a senator's widow, and when people turned to look at her, she smiled. Smiled. Sylvia ushered her up front like royalty. This is Harper, she said proudly to anyone within earshot. She's family now. She's carrying my grandchild. I could feel the whispers starting behind me. I could feel my parents' discomfort. My sister-in-law looked at me in pity. No one had told them who this woman was. They understood enough. I kept my head high. I read the eulogy. I held the line until Harper opened her mouth. It was during the post-service reception in the adjoining hall. I was standing near the coffee table, answering some awkward condolences from distant cousins, when I heard Harper raise her voice. She deserved it. She said, 8 years and nothing. No kids, no legacy, no spark. She was just a placeholder. The room quieted. I turned. She was talking to two women. I didn't recognize, laughing, tossing her hair. She couldn't even keep his attention. Harper added, maybe if she wasn't a barren little failure, none of this would have happened. I felt the blood drained from my face. But that wasn't the worst part. Sylvia appeared beside her and laid a hand on her shoulder. You had 8 years, Erin, she said to me, loud enough for everyone to hear and nothing. Maybe Connor just needed a real woman. People gasped. Someone dropped a glass. The room buzzed like a hornet's nest. I opened my mouth to speak, but I couldn't find air. My knees trembled. It was time someone told the truth about Harper Vance. All heads turned as my brother Dylan, a former police officer and veteran, stood in the doorway. He was the only man in my life who had never failed to protect me. His jaw was tight, his eyes locked on Harper, and he wasn't smiling. Dylan stepped forward, calm and deliberate. The room went deathly quiet. Harper's eyes widened, her fake grief twisting into something closer to panic. I knew you looked familiar, he said, stopping just a few feet from her. But it wasn't until I made a call this morning that it clicked. Harper stiffened. My friend TJ sends his regards, Dylan added, and her face drained of color. I blinked. TJ Dylan glanced at me, then returned his eyes to her. Her husband, Erin, his real name's Thomas Jameson, former Army, moved to Denver 3 years ago. Married Harper Vance. Shortly after, people around us started murmuring Mason stood. Sylvia's hand dropped from Harper's arm. Don't listen to him. Harper said quickly, I left him. We're separated. It's complicated. No, it's not. Dylan interrupted coldly. You disappeared with his money, cleared out his savings, filed no divorce papers, and started playing fiancé to a man who already had a wife. I felt something inside me start to lift. Dylan turned to the stunned crowd. This woman isn't Connor's widow. She's still legally married. Everything she's claiming is a lie then, as if on cue, the back door is opened. And in walked a tall man in jeans and a brown leather jacket. I breathed Harper. The man barked. She actually flinched. He strode down the aisle like he was walking into a courtroom. What the hell are you wearing? Whose funeral is this? She started backing away. I told you. He held up his phone and played a voice recording. It was grainy, but her voice was unmistakable. I faked the pregnancy. I just wanted a slice of his money. His family's loaded. Once he's gone, I'll say the baby's his. By the time they figure it out, too late. A woman in the back gasped. Sylvia staggered into her chair. You lied about being pregnant, I asked, my voice shaking. Harper's mouth opened and closed. You tried to bury me at my husband's funeral. I whispered, with a story you built out of garbage. TJ stepped forward, pulled out a folded document, and slapped it on the table beside the condolence book, divorce papers. Already signed by me. All we need now is your signature and a few witnesses. Anyone here care to oblige? People practically tripped over each other to get closer. Harper's hands trembled as she scribbled her name, her glamour unraveling by the second. The moment the pen left the page, she bolted toward the door. But Dylan stepped in her way. You stole from a veteran, he said flatly, and committed fraud across state lines. You think we're letting you walk out of here? He reached into his jacket and pulled out his badge, expired, but still real. I made a few more calls this morning, too. You'll be getting visitors. Harper looked around. No one came to her defense, not even Sylvia. She turned wide-eyed and fled down the hall, heels clicking like a gavel. The aftermath was quiet, embarrassed. Silence hung in the air like smoke. Sylvia sat like a statue. I thought she'd blame me, scream, lash out. Instead, she whispered, I was wrong about everything. It didn't bring me satisfaction. Not yet, but it was a start. Mason came to me later and placed a warm, heavy hand on my shoulder. I'm sorry, Erin, he said quietly. You didn't deserve this. No, I said, but I survived it, and that somehow meant more than winning. A few weeks passed. The chaos died down. I went back to work. I stopped checking the mailbox with dread. I slept through the night for the first time in months. One morning, I found myself unable to keep down my coffee. Initially, I dismissed it as stress, but when it recurred, I decided to be safe. I bought a test from the pharmacy, took it in the office bathroom, and saw 2 lines sitting on the closed toilet, gripping the sink's edge. I felt it was the only thing keeping me grounded. I drove directly to my doctor for a blood test to confirm the numbers. She smiled kindly and said, Congratulations, Erin. You're pregnant. Walking out into the sunlight, a hand instinctively went to my stomach. A strange sense of weightlessness washed over me after all the pain, betrayal, humiliation, death, and lies, after Harper's actions, Sylvia's cruelty, and Connor's silence. There it was, a heartbeat, not Connor's, mine and something else, something small and growing, and finally mine. I sat in the car, stared out the windshield, and whispered to no one. He never gave me peace, or love, or safety. But maybe this child is the only true gift Connor ever left behind. And for the first time in a long time, I smiled.